My name is Amanda.
And I'm Kristin.
And we are the Exorcisters. So sit back, relax, and let's get creepy. Welcome to episode 35. And in this episode, we are going to dive into the 1987... I don't know, is it a cult classic or just a classic? I mean, how widely known is this?
It's probably just a cult classic that turned into a classic, I guess. Because it's not like it had a wide release, I don't think. And people weren't really excited about it.
Right.
But everyone knows Pinhead now.
Right. So clearly, we're going to be discussing Hellraiser. This was my first time seeing this film ever.
Really?
Yeah.
And?
I mean, okay. It's just like when something is hyped up because and this is my own fault for letting like a pop culture and things like that like get into my head, I guess. Mm-hmm. You expect a lot of Pinhead.
Yeah.
And what you don't get is a lot of Pinhead.
True.
Because he's a really cool character. All of them are. Mm-hmm. All the Hellions or Cinnabons, if you will.
The Cinnabites?
Yes. So I was expecting something completely different than what I got, and that's not always a bad thing. And in this case, it may not have been a bad thing necessarily either. Mm-hmm. It was just not what I expected. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot that I don't know.
Didn't like or didn't get?
No, I understood, but they don't explain anything.
No, they don't.
Like in most movies, there's a lot of implied, like you can figure it out. And in this one, it just asks you to do a lot of the work yourself, which is usually fine. It was just like, why, I guess. Yeah. And I've heard that in the sequels that is answered.
Yeah,
at least
there's a lot more about Pinhead, at least, and they explain the box a lot more.
Right,
Which is what I
wanted. I wanted to know why Frank was in that situation. What happened to him? How did he get there? Why did blood just restart his heart? That was It just like I was like, okay, guess this is going to be one of those movies where you're just going to have to take a lot of it at face value.
Yeah,
because you don't know.
I read the book, which this is Clive Barker's directorial, written screenplay, the actual book. This is just his baby all around, and I read his book, and it doesn't explain it in that either.
I don't know. But did he write any of the sequels?
Yes. He wrote a second book also, so maybe the second one explains it.
Pretty
sure.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's what Hellraiser 2 is about. So
when I teased this on Instagram, I was talking to somebody. They sent in a message, and they were like, "Oh, the second one, like, he gets a lot more into things." And I was like, "Okay, well then, we will do the second one, I'm sure, eventually." So,
and I think it's like a direct, like literally almost the same scene moves on to the second one. I'm pretty sure. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I think that's what it is.
What I didn't mind was this is 1987, so we're still in that 80s special effects that is what it is. You know, everybody, it's the blue lightning strikes and the very campy kind of blood and gore. And that didn't really bother me because I didn't think it was too bad in this movie.
No, there were some scenes that were really good. Like when he's coming back from the dead and putting his frame back together and stuff. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so that didn't bother me at all. And even then, I typically don't knock like 70s, 80s, 90s movies for their special effects.
Yeah.
Unless it's like, I've seen something that did that 100% better during the same time frame.
So then we know you guys can.
Right. Or didn't have the budget to.
Yeah.
But what kind of got me was you get this couple moving into this old spooky house, which is very characteristic of movies, especially around this time. Mm-hmm. And it's cutting between this woman and her husband's brother on their wedding day. She fucks him on her wedding dress.
Yes, literally on her dress.
I was texting you. I was like, what?
Yeah, she for sure did that.
Do people like that actually exist? That also
And in the book, it is definitely more, they didn't have sex. He raped her. Then she started liking him, and it's like,
So it was like a rapey version of Stockholm Syndrome.
Yes.
That's disgusting.
Very much so. If anybody knows anything about General Hospital from the 80s, Luke and Laura, he raped her. That's how they got together. And then they got married and had kids and everything. And it's like, what the fuck? It's like that.
Stop rewarding men for being rapists.
Right?
Women.
Yeah.
No, I know that's way deeper than just like, stop. Mm-hmm. I know there's a lot of psychological components that come into that, but I hate seeing it portrayed that way. Mm-hmm. Like, she is so enamored with him and so in love with him. Dude. He literally walks in the door. She's like, "Oh, you're Frank. Never met him before." Mm-hmm. And fucks him on her wedding dress.
You can't call that love. I'm sorry. There's no way in hell you can call that love. You can call that obsession.
Lust. Yeah, exactly. And there's a good shot of them fucking going back and forth between Larry moving the mattress, because Larry is her husband, and they're moving into this house, and he's like moving the mattress and they can't get it past the stairs, so he's like pushing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
like that, you know, and then you get the back and forth between
that
the
scene
sex
was
scene.
actually supposed to be longer, but they made him cut it so that they wouldn't get such a high rating.
It was already uncomfortable.
No, it was supposed to be even longer.
But the gore, I thought, was actually pretty well done and pretty realistic in most, like, there's this part where he's moving the mattress and this nail, his hand slides across it.
God,
and
it was so horrible.
It was like a big nail. It wasn't just like a picture hanging nail. This was like a keep the stairwell together nail.
Yeah.
It was huge, and it cuts through the top of his hand.
It cuts the fuck out of him.
It was good. It was
my
nasty.
God.
Like this, you know, all the little veins right there, it just sliced right through him. And it was a wide cut, too.
And it was like a rusty nail, so he's going to have to get a tetanus shot. Oh, it's going to be a bad day for him.
Speaking of tetanus shots, side story. When I worked at Ross, which was the worst job I've ever had in my life, and do you know those... They're security tags. They're the hard ones, and they have to put them in the machine to take them out. Well, part of it is a pin, and there's like a little needle-looking thing that's really pointy, and it's probably about maybe an inch long. I was wearing flats, and I stepped on one.
Oh, my God.
And it went into my foot, and so I had... Because it happened at work, like, I had to peel it out of my foot.
Oh, my God. I hate what you're saying right now so much.
And you want to know how they got it out? They had to get scissors to clamp it and pull it out because fingers wouldn't do it. So they're just, like, trying to pry this thing out of between the sole of my flats and in my foot. So they had to take scissors and go on either side of it and basically, like a crowbar, like, pry it out of my foot. So since it happened at work... Like, they made me, like, go redo my tetanus shot because I didn't know when the last time I got one. So I know for a fact now that I got one in 2012, and I don't have to get one again until 2022.
Oh, my fucking God. I hate that story so much.
You're welcome.
That was fucking horrible.
You're welcome.
What the... Were you, like, just crying and just freaking out? Because I would have been.
No, I was just kind of like it happened, and I felt it, and I was like it took the breath out of me. And luckily, we were closing, so I didn't have, like, a lot of customers in front of me because I was also, like, what they called the front-end supervisor. So there were, like, 7 registers, and I was basically in charge of all the cashiers. And so we also had some chairs that sat up at the front, like, for people waiting for people that were disabled and didn't want to look around. And so I just, like, hopped to one of those chairs, and I looked, and I was just, like, in total, like, I was just staring at this. Like, I knew the next step was to have to get it out, and I knew how bad that was going to hurt. Because the getting it out hurt worse than it going in. Yeah.
That's always the worst. Like, when you actually accidentally step on glass or something, getting it out is the absolute worst.
Like, you'll just stare at it forever. Like, that lives there now.
Yeah,
I'm not getting
exactly.
it out. So, anyways, and like we were saying, the cut is fucking gnarly. It's a good one. And the point of that is, though, he's bleeding a lot. He goes upstairs to find her, and he is big baby about blood. He's, like, about to pass out. But he is also bleeding a shit ton.
I was going to say, he's, like, bleeding out.
It
So
is
that's
gushing.
how much blood there's going on.
Yeah. And it gets absorbed into the floor. Like, it's just like a sponge. It, like, sucks it in. And when this blood is sucked in, you hear this heart... Or you see, this heart start, like, beating right under the floorboard. And then when they leave, this, like, it looks like what I described as a demony creature arises from the ground, and it's all bloody and nasty, and it's basically reassembling its body.
Which the special effects on that were really good.
Yeah, I agree. Which, what confused me was I was just like, but why? Like, what?
Why
just, like,
back?
this little bit of blood, like... If anybody bled in that house, like, that was just going to bring him back. And I'm assuming
Unless it had to be his brother because it's family.
Oh, that's true. Because what you do find out is it's his brother, the one that was having sex with his wife. Like,
yeah. I mean, I could be wrong. She brings in other guys that aren't family. Maybe he had to trigger it. Maybe it didn't matter. I don't know.
Yeah. And her name is Julia, by the way. And she walks in... And it comes after her. And this was probably the scariest scene to me, was that, can you imagine walking into a room and this, like, bloody, like, it just basically looks like he's, you know, decomposing muscle and blood, like, crawling towards her quickly, like as if a zombie had lost its legs, basically. And he says, it's Frank, and I need your help. And Frank needs more blood and is like, you have to heal me. And it's like,
Yeah, no.
But if I don't, you'll stay like this, and you can't really do anything to me, right? Like,
exactly.
But she has this. I mean, it looks like 20 years since they
did anything.
Yeah, because, or maybe 10. It's been a long time though, because they did try significantly to make her look younger in those cutback scenes,
and they did it like the early 80s hair and stuff like that, which was really cool. Nice touch.
Yeah. And Larry also has this daughter, and she has, I guess, some boyfriend, and she's telling him she doesn't like Julia, and there's some, like, homeless guy watching her. She's walking down the street, but you only get, like, a little, like, look at that. It's very quick.
That's, in the book, that's, like, the only big difference I noticed was that's actually not his daughter in the book. That's just his best friend who secretly loves him. That's just around and trying to help him out.
That would probably make a little more sense as to why her and Julia don't. But I guess there's also, like, you know, my mom is dead. And
exactly.
Yeah. So I guess it's plausible either way. And then it cuts to Julia telling Larry that she will do anything for him. And she is still physically attracted to this thing. It's just, it ain't cute. It's like, I don't know what kind of, I don't think I've ever loved anybody that much.
That you could look at that gross, bloody creature
fuck it?
crawling at you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And think like, well, can we have sex later? Like, no.
Right.
So the daughter's name is Kirsty. I think it's Christy or Kirsty, but I think it's Kirsty. Has a nightmare about her dad and calls him to check and make sure that he's okay. And he's fine right now, but this dream comes back later. Mm-hmm. And he's not. But so now Julia is starting to bring home random people, like from the bar. She'll pick him up and bring him home. And at first she kills him with a hammer. I was like, you couldn't have done anything a little less gruesome. Because she has to bring in these people now because he needs so much. Every time he gets blood, he forms more and more and more. And so she has to go get people to murder, but she chooses a hammer. And I don't know, does the death have to be as bloody as possible?
I mean, this whole movie is just pretty bloody. They probably just liked that touch, like to keep it
the gore.
Gross like that. Yeah.
Right. And then she leaves after she beats him up because Frank's going to do his thing.
And that's when you see him crawling towards the body, and that creeped me out the most.
When he's crawling towards the body? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And then she goes in, and he is now skeleton and muscle, at least. He ain't got no skin, but he's, like, standing up on his own. So we have some improvement there, I guess you could say. And he wants to, like, touch her because he's nasty. I know. But then her husband comes home, and she's cleaning up and tells him she feels sick. And, of course, he's concerned. He's a pretty good dude, her husband, seemingly.
He's a really good guy.
Like,
it's sad that he has her.
Yeah, because she's terrible. She's the worst. There are very few wives in horror movies that I can think of that are worse. It's usually always, this is a man manipulating this woman, but still.
Yeah, it's usually the husband.
And Frank tells Julia when she sneaks back in to see him that he must they need to get away from them. Like, she's trying to leave the room, and he's freaking out. And he's like, we need to get away from them, is all he says. And then he puts, this was disgusting, and it has stayed with me since I watched this movie a couple weeks ago. She puts his nasty ass, no flesh on this finger, just exposed muscle and bone finger in her mouth as like a seductive thing. And I was like, there could not be anything more disgusting.
I forgot about that. Ew.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
It is the nastiest. Because in the first scene when they start, like, they're human, it's years and years and years ago, and they do that. And I've just never been one to be like, let's get turned on, let me, like, stick my thumb in your mouth. Like, but the fact that it's just, that's disgusting. Yeah. That's really nasty. I put it in all capital letters. So later, Kirsty is working in a pet shop, and that same homeless man is he stuck his whole hand in, like, this bin of feeder crickets, and he's just so eating all these grasshoppers and crickets. And so this guy's just kind of introduced in these random scenes, specifically with Kirsty. And he looks like at the typical homeless, scraggly, gloves, lots of, he's very clearly homeless. And then Julia brings home another dude, and Frank, of course, feeds on him and starts to say, well, I'm tasting things now. So he's not quite fleshy yet, but senses are coming back to him.
Gross.
Yeah. And he shows her the box, the cube, whatever you want. What do they call it in the book? I think they say it in the movie later, and I got it, but
I'm not even remembering it in the book, honestly.
He says that it shows the pleasures and pains of heaven and hell. And so she says she'll help him, and they'll never find him, so now they plan on just disappearing after he's well enough to do so. And I have a question.
What's your question?
Is kissing in the 80s really that gross and dramatic? Because it's like every single, like, maybe it's like 60s through 80s movie. They're just like opening and closing their mouths like predators.
Like predators.
It's like, kind of like in Gone with the Wind. You know, it's like this very dramatic, like swoony moment. But it's just like, that's disgusting. I saw her whole mouth go over his entire mouth.
Yeah, she goes in the bathroom and she's just like covered in so much blood. It's gross. It's real gross.
So Julia distracts Larry, but by getting all like sexy with him because he's come home and now Frank is pretty much of enough strength to do whatever he wants.
To kill a rat in front of them trying to do it.
Yeah, so Julia's distracting Larry by, like, getting sexy with him, and this was also pretty creepy, actually, though, but they're on the bed, and he's just, like, kissing all over her, like, necking, if you will, and Frank fucking comes out from the closet with a rat and, like, starts almost what looks like skinning it, so he takes a knife into one end and slides it all the way over to the other end, and this poor little rat...
Oh, yeah.
While she's trying to get licked.
Well, she's trying to get licked.
She is. Not anymore. Because she freaks out. And Larry's like, I don't know what you want from me. Meh, meh, meh.
Which is fair.
Right.
He's like, sweet, you want to do it. And then she's like, F off. Poor guy.
Yeah. And Kirsty actually, like, it cuts away from that. It looks like Frank is going to kill him. But then he just, like, slinks back into the shadows. And it looks, you're like, okay, he's dead. Like, because he's coming up behind him. But it cuts away, so he doesn't kill him that you know of. And it cuts to Kirsty, and she's getting really suspicious of Julia because she's doing weird stuff. So she sees Julia lead another man into the house. So her first thought is she's cheating.
Right.
Which would be much easier. So... Frank finds Kirsty and corners her in the bedroom and calls her beautiful, and he's being weird and like, you grew up to be such a beautiful woman. That is your niece.
Yes.
That is disgusting.
Yes.
So this is kind of incestuous too.
Very
like,
much so.
He doesn't
real
ever
gross.
like do anything to her, but it's very implied.
I mean, this whole movie is just about sex and all the different variations of sex in the world. So I guess let's throw a little incest in there.
Might as well.
Gross.
And she grabs the cube, the box, the hell box, if you will. Somebody's going to really ream us for not knowing what that's called, but...
I don't think they talk about it until future movies, because I don't remember the name of it in the book. I'm just not remembering that at all.
I don't remember it either. Like, I'm looking in my notes, and I don't see it, so... Whatever. Somebody can come for us. It's fine. They've done it before. And he freaks out because she takes it. Like, loses his shit. And she's walking down the street with it, and she just passes out and wakes up in this weird hospital. I'm assuming it's I don't know if it's psychiatric or not, but I don't think it's protocol to lock patients in their rooms unless it's a psychiatric hospital.
Or Demons Are Coming. It's a horror movie.
Right, yeah. So they lock her in her room and with the box and say the police want to talk to her. And she activates the box. She just thinks it's a puzzle box, so she starts playing with it. And they walk in... She unlocks it, and the wall opens to this hallway. And she's like, it's a good idea to go down the hallway.
For sure.
First of all, I would probably just assume that they drugged me. Or that I was literally losing my shit. My first thought wouldn't be like, let's go down the hallway that just opened up in the wall.
I agree. Like, what the fuck?
So she follows the sound of a baby crying, and then this creature from hell basically starts chasing her. And she gets back to her room only to unlock another creature, and then Pinhead shows up. And he says, the box you opened and we came, it is a means to summon us, and we are demons to some and angels to others. And he says, no tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering, which is one of the most iconic lines of this movie. Even if you haven't seen Hellraiser, you've probably heard, no tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.
Yeah.
And that's where it's from.
It took him 6 hours to get in that makeup.
For like 2 scenes.
Dude, right? I could not imagine sitting there for 6 hours. I mean, okay, so we work for 8 hours a day. And then you go do your scene real quick, and then you have to do multiple takes.
Right.
That poor guy. That would have been a long fucking day.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons I actually didn't rent this movie, because I have very vivid memories of being at what was Video and Tan Express in Forney, Texas. We didn't have a Blockbuster because we were too small. The cover of Hellraiser, like, it's just, and I wouldn't say it scared me, but it was like, I don't think I want to get into that movie because of what that looks like. I just don't think I want to go there.
That's pretty cool.
So I didn't.
That's a pretty cool thing.
But now watching it, you get him and the two other Cenobites, and I didn't say Cinnabons. Are you proud of me?
You didn't. I'm so proud.
And they're really cool. Mm-hmm. And they reminded me of like Marilyn Manson, like a punk band. Not that Marilyn Manson's very punk, but like that aesthetic, which speaks to my little emo soul, right?
That's definitely where Clive Barker took a bunch of that. He took it from like fetish clubs, but also a lot of the punk stuff that we didn't get a huge amount here in the States, but in UK, so much punk.
Ramones, the Sex Pistols.
Yes,
I mean,
all over the place.
Yeah.
So he took a lot from that for these characters, which is really cool.
That's cool. And you can tell that there is some BDSM influence here because of Pinhead, first of all, has the coolest fucking, it's like a trench coat kind of like robe type thing. It is so fucking cool. And then I think it's the female Cenobite, if I'm correct, the one that has the opened neck.
They used to call her Deep Throat around set, but they couldn't put that in the movie because
ratings.
Deep Throat. Like,
right.
Yeah.
And copyright because Deep Throat.
Yeah.
She was really cool. I didn't realize she was supposed to be a female because they're all kind of, well, Pinhead's not that androgynous, but this character is.
Yeah.
But she was so cool. I was like, other than the gaping hole in her neck, aesthetics. So then it cuts away from all this, even though this is like the coolest part of the movie so far. Cuts away from that. Goes back to fucking Julia, and she gives her husband to Frank for his skin. So now,
poor guy.
Frank looks like Larry because he took on his skin.
Which is so fucking gross.
And then they fuck.
Of course. We have to.
You're right. And then Kirsty comes knocking to see her dad. And of course, this is actually the first time you see Frank and he looks like Larry. Like you can assume, but
it's real gross. She's
there because she wants to see Frank's body, and the three show up and say they want the man who did this. So basically, she goes in because these three basically have kind of told her kind of what's going on. And she goes upstairs to find Frank's body and show her dad and prove that Julia's being a sketchy bitch. And Pinhead and the three, they show up and they see Larry's dead body. And they're like, we want the man who did this. Because it seems like this whole time Frank's been evading them.
Yeah.
Which he has.
Yeah.
Surprisingly successfully, but it took breaking down his entire being in order to do so. So she says that she will not give them anything and runs out. And then Kirsty realizes that Frank stole her dad's skin, and he goes to stab Kirsty, but instead Kirsty moves and he stabs Julia, which it seems like that was his intention this whole time. Honestly, yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
You cheating horrible bitch.
Yeah. Not just cheating, you cheating, murdering horrible bitch. These poor guys at this bar, they just were looking for a lay. Like, one of them even was like, I've been so lonely, I never do this, and he doesn't want to, and you're like, run.
Yeah.
So good. She dies, so that's some resolve you get there. And he tells her it's nothing personal, and then she just, like, shrivels up. I wish sometimes that supernatural, quote-unquote, death in 80s movies weren't so lame, but then at the same time, it gives them a lot of character, I guess, charm.
Yeah.
Because some of them, especially when they're like just dissolving into nothing, or like it gives us some very iconic movie scenes, but you're like, oof.
Well, some of this ending stuff also, they were starting to run out of money from their budget, so they did get worse special effects as it went. Yeah.
And it probably was more important for Frank's body to assemble because that was such a long scene than it was for, So, Kirsty goes to hide, and while she's hiding in this, like, storage room, this, like, I don't know what it was. Was it, like, a creature from hell again? It, like, vomits maggots all over her.
Yeah.
Like, it was some sort of, it looked like, it wasn't one of the three, but it looked like one of those creatures. Okay. Biggest problem with the movie is this bitch right here.
I'm ready.
Like, Julia's terrible, but she's supposed to be terrible. She's written that way. And I'm sure Kirsty is, too. But what really gets me is she's hiding in this room, and Frank goes in and like looks around in there for a minute, and then he leaves. And then she's like, okay, I can leave now too.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
She goes and stands in the hallway and on the banister, and she starts sobbing loudly. You know he's still in the house looking for you, and you just decide to go like loudly. And I'm like, you deserve to be murdered. And she almost gets got because he's behind her. Obviously, like a good killer is just going to wait for you to come out of your hiding spot and make you think it's safe, which is exactly what he's doing. Again, in caps, why? And then Pinhead and the rest of them show up and they corner Frank and they string him up by fish hooks. This is not the first time we've gotten the fish hook imagery. And this one specifically, the fish hooks go into his face skin and they pull back. And so...
Which is great.
Yeah. And it stretches his face and he says, Jesus wept. And then he laughs a little before he's torn apart.
Which was improvised. He was supposed to say, fuck you, or something like that. And then...
Jesus wept is better.
Yeah.
Fuck you is pretty...
That's quotable now. Everyone says that.
Right.
And it came from that.
The three from hell don't want Kirsty to leave. And as they come for her, she's figured out how to send them away. And then her boyfriend comes by. She's still fighting him off. And he's just like immediately on board. No questions asked. Like, I guess that's a good boyfriend.
Yeah.
But he's like, oh, we're fighting hellions? Got it. I'm here for it. They have this last hell beast to fight off. They drop the box, but then get it back. Like, it's just like this whole dramatic scene. They fall, they drop it, they get it back, and then ta-da, everybody's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So then they leave the house and go to this homeless camp, and you can tell because apparently it's also just like a fire party because, like, I know in homeless camps you depict like a barrel with fire because they stand around it, but like there are just fires. There's probably like a dozen of them in this small little space where there's nobody there. But you'll soon find out that this homeless man we've been seeing this entire time, he sets himself on fire and he pulls the box out and then he turns into a dragon from hell.
Yeah.
And that's how the movie ends. So it's one of those movies where it's like, it's just weird. Mm-hmm. Like if you just want to get into like a weird headspace, weird vibe, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Then, okay, watch it. And I think that a lot of people, it did come out in the 80s. And so I think a lot of people that were teenagers or young kids in the 80s or even the 90s that were into horror, this is one of their staples.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just not probably something, it's not that I wouldn't watch it again. Like if it was on TV and I was doing stuff, I would probably turn it on.
Yeah.
But, looking at my collection of Blu-rays, am I going to specifically be like, I want to watch Hellraiser? Probably not.
Yeah, I agree.
But as I'm talking about it, I'm warming up to it a little bit more.
That's good.
It was just such a weird experience from start to finish with not a lot of, I just want so much more backstory about the box and about Pinhead, which I think is probably what, and I could be totally wrong, this is just an estimation, what people wanted after they saw Hellraiser, which is why we got so many of them after. I don't know how many there are.
Also, I mean, there are so many that he's now doing or has done comic books. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Like,
he's the face. Like, even on the Blu-ray and the VHS, I mean, when you look back in the day, he was on the face of it, and he's on the spines. It's just like he is Hellraiser. I would probably give this movie a 3 out of 5, kind of middle of the road for me. I didn't hate it by any means, but it's not something that I loved and that I'll continue to reach for. And I also don't have that nostalgia to go on either. So just as a first-time viewer, I'd probably give it a 3 out of 5.
Yeah, that's me also. We tend to follow each other. 3 out of 5. I don't have nostalgia either on it. I've seen it like one other time. I've seen all the sequels, but I don't really care that much about it. So it was okay. It was a good movie. Watch it, pick it up, but meh.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. Well, thank you guys for joining us. If you want to hang out with us on social media, our Facebook and Instagram are The Exorcisters Podcast. On Twitter, it is just at The Exorcisters. And let us know how you feel about Hellraiser. If you feel like we were just not fair because you've been watching it your whole life and you really love it, tell us why it's great. Or if you agree with us, we'd love to hear either way. You can always email us anything you want at theexorcisters@gmail.com.
And next time, did she show you the horses? Till then, stay creepy.